All right, today we're cracking open the story of the Manhattan Project. This was a top secret mission, a race to build a weapon of, well, unimaginable power. It was this massive scientific gamble that didn't just end a world war, it completely redefined our future.
You know, when you think about World War II, you probably picture soldiers on the battlefield, right? But that's not the whole story, not by a long shot.
Because it was also fought with science. Yeah, some of the most crucial battles weren't fought in trenches, but in laboratories and on chalkboards. They were fought inside the minds of some of the world's most brilliant thinkers. And that is the story we're getting into today.
So, Section 1, a war fought with science. The question is, how does a scientific theory, something you'd see in a textbook, suddenly become the centerpiece of a global war? Well, it all kicked off with one single revolutionary discovery.
So picture this. It's the late 1930s, and scientists figure out something that honestly sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. They discovered how to split an atom. They called it nuclear fission. And when they did it, it released this absolutely staggering amount of energy. But here's the kicker. They realized it could create a chain reaction, a self-sustaining explosion of just immense power. Now, in a world that's teetering on the brink of war, that realization immediately led to one really terrifying question.
Yeah, what if Nazi Germany got their hands on this first? This was the fear that absolutely haunted the Allied powers. I mean, can you imagine? The most destructive weapon ever conceived in the hands of Adolf Hitler. It was the ultimate nightmare scenario, and it created an urgency that just could not be ignored.
The alarm bells started ringing loud and clear in 1939. Albert Einstein, yes, the Albert Einstein, along with a few other scientists, wrote a letter to the US government basically screaming, "This is a real danger." And the response? It was decisive. Just a few years later, by 1942, the United States had launched this top-secret all-out sprint to build an atomic bomb first. Its codename, the Manhattan Project.
Okay, Section 2, the secret atomic race. And when we say this was an effort of unprecedented scale, honestly, the size of this project is kind of hard to wrap your head around. This wasn't just some lab. It was a sprawling, secret empire built from the ground up for one single purpose.
Get this, over 130,000 people were involved. Just let that number sink in. To put that into perspective, that's more people than lived in a city like Reno or Savannah back then. An entire city's worth of people, all working towards one secret goal.
And the price tag? We're talking about $2 billion. And that's back then. In today's money, that's well over $30 billion. It was an absolutely massive gamble, which really tells you just how high the stakes were. So, where did all this happen? The project was spread across these massive, secret cities that were basically built from scratch. Places like Los Alamos, New Mexico, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Hanford, Washington. And the secrecy? It was absolute. We're talking airtight. Most of the tens of thousands of workers, they had no clue what they were actually building. They were told only what they needed to know for their tiny little part of the job. Each person was just one piece of this enormous hidden puzzle.
And right at the heart of this whole thing, you had this mix of brilliant minds and extremely volatile materials. The person leading the entire scientific charge was the physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. His team's mission was simple on paper, but incredibly complex in reality. Figure out how to turn one of two key materials into a weapon. Their choices were either a specific type of uranium, uranium-235, or this brand new element they discovered, called plutonium.
All right, Section 3, unleashing a new power. For years, all of this was just theory, right? It was equations on a blackboard, concepts in scientists' heads, but in the summer of 1945, all that theory was about to become a truly terrifying, world-altering reality.
The date, July 16, 1945. The place, the middle of the New Mexico desert. The site was codenamed Trinity, and there, scientists were getting ready to test the world's very first atomic bomb. Honestly, nobody knew for sure what was about to happen. Would it even work? Or would it be bigger than they ever imagined?
And what happened next was, well, it was beyond anything they could have possibly imagined. A flash of light so bright it was like a second sun had just been born. A massive, roaring fireball that completely vaporized the steel tower holding the device. And then, that iconic mushroom cloud, climbing miles and miles into the sky. The shockwave was felt over 100 miles away. In that moment, humanity had literally unleashed the power of the stars right here on Earth.
J. Robert Oppenheimer said later that at that exact moment, he just knew the world would not be the same. But another, much darker thought also crossed his mind. He famously recalled a line from Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." He knew, and everyone there knew, that history had just been split right in two. There was the world before the bomb, and now there was the world after.
Next up, Section 4, the bombings and the end. So the test was a success, but now a truly heavy decision had to be made. See, the war in Europe was already over, but the brutal fight in the Pacific against Japan was still raging. Now this weapon, the most powerful weapon in the world, was real, and the question became, should we use it?
The decision was made. On August 6, 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped, and it obliterated the city of Hiroshima. Just 3 days after that, a second bomb fell on Nagasaki. The destruction was absolute. And only 6 days after that second bomb, on August 15th, Japan announced its surrender. World War II was officially over.
Now, the use of these bombs is still one of the most intensely debated actions in all of modern history. On one hand, you have the argument that it was a terrible but necessary choice, that it ended the war quickly and saved lives by preventing a full-scale invasion of Japan, which could have cost millions more lives, on both sides. But on the other hand, critics point to the unimaginable human toll and argue that targeting entire cities full of civilians with a weapon like this raised profound moral questions, questions we are still wrestling with today.
So let's talk about the aftermath. Section 5, the legacy of the atom. Because the end of the war wasn't the end of this story. Not at all. In so many ways, it was just the beginning. The real legacy of the Manhattan Project was just starting to unfold, and it would go on to shape the entire world.
The world was just fundamentally different. The atomic age had begun. This new power kicked off a terrifying nuclear arms race between the US and the Soviet Union that defined the Cold War. It forced us all to ask these brand new, tough questions about the responsibility of scientists and the ethics of modern warfare. And maybe most chillingly, for the first time in all of human history, we held in our hands the power to cause our own total annihilation.
So when you really boil it all down, the Manhattan Project was so much more than just a wartime weapons program. It was a genuine turning point for our entire species. It was the moment where the boundaries of science and the fate of humanity got tangled up together, permanently.
And that leaves us with one last big thought. The scientists of the Manhattan Project, they unleashed this immense new power into the world. And that knowledge, well, it can never be unlearned. The genie is out of the bottle, so to speak. It's a stark reminder that with great knowledge comes great responsibility. We are all living in the world they helped create. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what's our responsibility now?